The mansion still stands on the edge of Savannah, Georgia. 3 stories tall, white columns rising like frozen ghosts. Hand-carved mahogany doors that shine even after more than a century. Tour guides walk past it every day. They talk about balance, symmetry, southern elegance. Cameras flash, visitors smile. But there is one detail they never mention. The man who designed every inch of that house never stepped inside it while he was alive. Not once. Not until the night his master died. And when the servants found him standing in the grand hall at sunrise, surrounded by something no one could explain, the entire household went silent. Within 48 hours the authorities sealed the story. The family burned records. Newspapers stayed quiet. History moved on. But houses remember. Walls remember. And if you know where to look, the proof is still there. Before we go deeper into the mystery of the Grenville estate and the man who built it, do me a quick favor. If this story gives you chills, hit the subscribe button right now. Like the video, share it with someone who loves dark history, and drop a comment telling me where you are listening from. It helps the channel grow more than you know. Now let us go back to Savannah. Spring of 1852. Where it all began. No one remembers his real name anymore. Not the name his mother whispered when he was born. In Savannah, he was known only as the craftsman. Savannah in 1852 was a city caught between beauty and brutality. Spanish moss hung from ancient oak trees like torn curtains. Cobblestone streets echoed with carriage wheels by day and secrets by night. The port never slept. Ships arrived from Charleston, New Orleans, Liverpool. They carried cotton, tobacco, indigo, and human beings packed into dark holds that still smelled of death long after they were emptied. Wealth rose quickly here. Townhouses stood proud with iron balconies and brick courtyards. Gardens overflowed with flowers so thick in the heat you could taste them in the air. Azaleas, camellias, jasmine, perfume layered over suffering. In market squares enslaved people sold vegetables grown in stolen hours. In parlors wealthy women discussed books and fashion while pretending not to see the hands that cooked their meals. Along factors' walk men counted profits while forgetting where those profits came from. This was Savannah, and into this city came the Grenville family. They arrived from Charleston in 1849 with money and ambition. Marcus Grenville was 42 years old. Tall, sharp-faced, eyes that never rested, always measuring, always judging, always searching for flaws. His wife Catherine moved quietly beside him. 36 years old, graceful, careful, she had learned how to exist without being noticed. She managed the household perfectly and spoke only when spoken to. They had 3 daughters, Virginia 14, Margaret 11, Anne 8, no sons. Marcus never said it out loud, but his disappointment filled every room they entered. Marcus did not come to Savannah to fit in. He came to dominate. He wanted a house that would silence whispers. A mansion so perfect it would force Savannah to accept the Grenvilles as permanent and powerful. A house that would erase the fact they were newcomers. But more than status, Marcus wanted perfection. A crooked line made his jaw tighten. Uneven spacing made his hands shake. A window 1 inch off balance felt like an insult. Within a month he hired an architect. He fired him within days. The second architect lasted 3 months. The third barely survived preliminary drawings. One was dismissed because the front portico felt narrow. Another because the windows were wrong. Another because the foundation measurements felt incorrect to Marcus even though they were mathematically sound. By 1852 6 architects had failed. Money bled away. Savannah society whispered. The Grenvilles still lived in a rented townhouse. Catherine watched quietly as Marcus obsessed over drawings night after night. Virginia did not stay quiet. "Father is going mad," she told her mother one humid evening. "Everyone says so." Catherine had no argument. Then came the rumor. Late April. A private club. Brandy glasses sweating in the heat. A man named Thomas Havisham spoke of a carved mantelpiece in his library. Perfect lines. Impossible detail. Work so precise it felt alive. Marcus leaned forward. "Who made it?" Havisham shrugged. "One of Drayton's people. A slave. Been in the workshop for years." "Can he design?" "I do not know. But when I showed him a rough sketch he understood immediately. Did not ask questions. Did not hesitate. What he built was better than what I imagined. It was as if he could see inside my mind. That was all Marcus needed. The next morning he ordered his carriage and rode to the Drayton property. The workshop smelled of wood and oil and sweat. Sunlight cut through dusty windows. And there he was, a man bent over a workbench. Dark hands steady, chisel moving like it knew where to go before it touched the wood. Marcus watched silently. The lines were flawless, the proportions exact. The craftsman did not look up. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was sharp. "Can you build a house?" The man stopped. Slowly he raised his head. His eyes were calm, too calm. "If I can see it," he said, "I can build it." Marcus smiled for the first time in years. What he did not know was that this would be the beginning of a house that would demand a price far greater than money. And the craftsman had already seen the ending. If you want part 2 of this story, make sure you are subscribed. Like the video, share it, and tell me in the comments if you believe a house can remember what was done inside it. Because this one never forgot. Part 2, the name he was given. Some people inherit houses. Some people build houses. And some people give their soul to a house long before the first stone is laid. The Grenville mansion would belong to all three. Before we continue, pause for 1 second. If this story pulls you in, if you enjoy dark history and forgotten truths, hit subscribe right now. Like this video, share it with someone who loves eerie stories. And tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Now let us return to Savannah in 1852. The workshop sat behind the main house, long and wooden, its wide doors thrown open to fight the southern heat. Marcus Grenville smelled it before he saw it. Fresh cut wood, varnish, linseed oil, sawdust thick in the air like fine powder. Inside, 3 men worked quietly. Saws whispered through timber. Mallets tapped in steady rhythm. Marcus barely noticed them. His eyes moved straight to the far corner. There stood the man, tall, lean, dark-skinned, early 30s perhaps. He worked beneath a window where sunlight fell directly onto his hands. Those hands moved with absolute control. Calm, precise, almost unnatural in their certainty. The man wore simple cotton clothes worn thin with use. But his work was anything but simple. Marcus moved closer, slowly. He did not want to break the rhythm. The man was carving a panel of cherry wood. What emerged from the surface was not decoration. It was a scene alive with motion. Hunting dogs frozen mid-leap. Muscles tight, teeth bared, horses stretched forward as if caught between heartbeats. Hunters leaned into their saddles. Trees showed individual leaves. Clouds held depth and weight. This was meant to be a cabinet door. But it was art. Marcus stood there for 5 full minutes. The craftsman sensed him. His shoulders tightened slightly, but he did not stop. Did not look up. The chisel kept moving. Finally Marcus spoke. "Who did this?" The overseer Talbot hurried over. Short, red-faced, sweat shining on his brow. "That's Nathan, sir. Been here near 8 years. Finest carver in Georgia if you ask me." "Can he draw?" Talbot hesitated. "Sir, he's taught himself some. Draws before he carves." "Has to. Show me." Talbot shifted nervously. "Mr. Drayton ain't here, sir." Marcus placed folded bills into Talbot's hand. "Show me everything." Money ended the conversation. They moved to a corner of the workshop. There were bundles carefully wrapped to protect them from dust. Talbot opened them. Marcus felt his breath catch. Sketches. Dozens of them. Floor plans. Elevations. Staircases. Window designs. Buildings that did not exist anywhere in Savannah. Or anywhere else. Charcoal on scraps. Pencil on torn paper. Designs scratched into wood when paper was unavailable. Marcus knew architecture. He knew immediately. This was not copying. This was creation. A plantation house drawn with perfect Greek revival balance. A church with a steeple that seemed to reach heaven without defying gravity. A library designed to hold knowledge efficiently and beautifully. None of it existed. Yet, Marcus's hands trembled. "I want to buy him." Talbot stared. "Sir, Mr. Drayton values Nathan highly. I will pay double, triple if needed. Go, now." It took 3 days. Drayton resisted, not because of morality, but because skill like this was rare. In the end money spoke louder than pride. $2,000. An extraordinary sum. Nathan was sold. On May 1, 1852, Nathan arrived at the Grenville property. He rode in the back of a wagon. He carried his tools wrapped in oilcloth. A small sack of personal items. That was all. Marcus did not meet him at the front door. He met him behind the house. A former carriage building had been emptied and rebuilt into a private workshop. Light filled the room. Benches stood ready. Storage shelves were clean and organized. Better than most quarters. Better than Nathan expected. Marcus stood in the doorway. I have seen your work. I want you to design my house. The finest home in Savannah. Perhaps in Georgia. Every detail perfect. Every measurement exact. Can you do that? Nathan set his tools down slowly. He looked Marcus directly in the eye. Talbot inhaled sharply. I can try, sir. Trying is not enough. I need certainty. Nathan held the gaze. Yes, sir. I can do it. I will need time, materials, and your direction. Marcus smiled. It was not warm. Good. You will work here. You will have what you need. You will design it, and you will oversee its construction. Then Marcus stepped closer. But you will never enter it. Not once. You will see it from outside only. This house will never be yours. Do you understand? Nathan did not react. I understand, sir. Marcus produced a document. Your name. Nathan is too common. From now on you are Nathan Grenville. Nathan looked at the paper. His new name written neatly in ink. Someone else's hand. He nodded once. I expect sketches in 2 weeks. Floor plans in 1 month. Final drawings in 3. Yes, sir. Marcus turned and left. Nathan stood alone in the workshop. He looked around the space. Then he unfolded one of his old drawings. A house with columns. White. Perfect. A house he had drawn years before. A house that looked exactly like what Marcus had described. Outside, Savannah breathed in heat and silence. And somewhere deep inside Nathan Grenville, something settled into place. The house had already chosen him. If you want part 3 where the design begins and strange patterns emerge in the blueprints, subscribe now. Like and share this story. And tell me in the comments if you believe some places are destined long before they are built. Part 3. The house begins to rise. Some creations demand more than time and skill. Some demand silence. And some demand obedience from everyone involved. Before we continue, take a moment. If this story pulls you deeper, subscribe now. Like this video, share it with someone who loves dark history, and leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now let us return to Savannah in 1852, where the ground itself was about to remember everything. Marcus Grenville left the workshop, and Nathan stood alone holding a piece of paper that declared him property while assigning him greatness. Talbot lingered in the doorway, uneasy. That's a strange arrangement, Talbot muttered. Building something you can never enter. Sounds like torture to me. Nathan folded the bill of sale carefully and placed it inside his sack. Perhaps, he said quietly. Or perhaps it is an opportunity. Opportunity for what? Nathan did not answer right away. His eyes moved across the workshop walls, measuring distance, imagining tables, storage, light. His mind was already working. To build something that lasts, he said finally. Something that outlives all of us. Talbot shook his head. You got a strange way of seeing the world, Nathan Grenville. Nathan laid out his tools with care. Strange ways sometimes see what others miss. The next 2 weeks passed in careful conversation. Every evening Marcus arrived at the workshop. He paced while Nathan listened. Marcus knew exactly what he hated but struggled to explain what he loved. I want grandeur but not excess. Elegance without vanity. I want people to walk in and feel smaller. Nathan listened and translated emotion into structure. How many rooms, sir? Enough to impress. A ballroom. Dining room for 20. Parlors. A library. And upstairs. Bedrooms. Guest rooms. Servants' quarters where appropriate. Style. Greek Revival. Proper Greek Revival. Most men copy without understanding. Nathan nodded. He understood perfectly. He worked out ratios. Column height to width. Pediment angles. Mathematical relationships that made ancient buildings feel eternal. Marcus unrolled the land survey. 3 acres. Set the house back. Curved drive. Gardens front and back. Face the southeast for morning light. Nathan studied the land like a living thing. He imagined sunlight moving across stone, shadows stretching at dusk. Then he began to draw. Days blurred together. Weeks melted away. Nathan worked from sunrise until lamplight. Sometimes he forgot to eat. Sometimes he slept on the workshop floor. Sketches became plans. Plans became precise drawings. Elevations took shape. Details multiplied. From the rented townhouse, Catherine Grenville sometimes looked toward the workshop. She saw the light burning long after midnight. She wondered what kind of man labored so fiercely over something he would never claim. She never asked. Marcus reviewed every page with ruthless focus. He measured, counted, calculated. Most of the time he found nothing wrong. But sometimes he did. The columns, he said one evening. 6 feet circumference. Yes, sir. Make them 6.5. Sir, that alters the ratios. I know what I want. Nathan obeyed. Then he recalculated everything. One change became many. Spacing shifted. Facade proportions adjusted. Window sizes changed. It was like altering one note in a symphony and rewriting the entire composition. But Nathan made it work. By late August the drawings were complete. Over 60 sheets. Every measurement precise. Even custom furniture designed to fit specific rooms. Marcus spent a full week reviewing them. On a humid Thursday evening he set the final sheet down. It is perfect. Nathan felt something loosen inside him. Construction begins in September. Hollis and Sons will build it. You will supervise everything. Yes, sir. Marcus paused at the door. No, one must know you designed this. If asked, the design is mine. You are merely executing. Yes, sir. Marcus left with the drawings. Nathan sat alone surrounded by empty tables. Months of work carried away under another man's name. He did not feel anger. He felt ownership. Construction began September 15th. Marcus hosted a ceremony. Prominent families attended. Marcus spoke of beauty and civilization. He turned the first shovel of dirt. Then the guests left. Reality arrived. Hollis and Sons brought 20 men. Builders, laborers, enslaved workers, stone cutters, bricklayers. James Hollis studied the drawings carefully. These are good, he said. Very good. Self-taught, Nathan said. Hollis raised his eyebrows. Remarkable. They understood each other immediately. Foundation digging began. Nathan walked the site constantly. Measuring, correcting, watching. And then something strange happened. Measurements matched drawings exactly. Too exactly. Men would set a line and later find it already aligned. Stones fit without trimming. Errors corrected themselves. Workers whispered. One man swore he dreamed the house before building it. Another claimed he heard footsteps on the foundation at night. Nathan said nothing. By November the foundation was complete. Perfectly level. Perfectly square. Marcus visited often. He was pleased. But he never noticed how the house seemed to rise with a will of its own. Nathan noticed. At night Nathan dreamed of hallways he had drawn but never walked. Doors he would never open. Rooms filled with silence. And always the same feeling. The house was watching him back. If you want part 4 where the walls rise and the workers begin to fear the structure itself, subscribe now. Like and share this story. And tell me in the comments if you believe buildings can inherit the intentions of the people who create them. Part 4. The walls begin to rise. Some houses are built with bricks and timber. Some houses are built with vision. And some houses seem to build themselves. Before we continue, take a moment. If this story chills you, if you love dark history and mysteries of old homes, subscribe now. Like this video, share it with someone who loves forgotten secrets. And leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Now let us return to Savannah in late 1852. The foundation was complete, perfectly level, perfectly square. Nathan Grenville stood on the edge of the excavation, watching the rising lines of the house as though they were alive. Every stone, every brick, every beam obeyed the drawings. More than obeyed, they anticipated. Workers found corners already squared, walls already aligned, mistakes correcting themselves almost before they occurred. At first, the men laughed and marveled. Skilled laborers prided themselves on precision. And yet, week after week, something unnatural made them uneasy. A brick would be laid. Later, it would appear straightened. A timber set in place seemed to shift subtly overnight to meet the exact angle it should occupy. Workers swore they could hear faint scratching from within the walls at night, soft and deliberate. Whispers of a rhythm that matched Nathan's own heartbeat. Nathan noticed too, but he said nothing. The mansion demanded focus, and he was determined to maintain it. Each day, he measured, adjusted, and recalculated. The columns rose from the foundation like sentinels. Each beam, each doorway, each arch aligned in harmony. Every worker followed instructions carefully, yet the building seemed to guide them beyond human error. Marcus visited occasionally. He admired the progress, unaware of the subtle strangeness surrounding the work. To him it was perfection brought to life. To Nathan it was something else entirely. The mansion seemed to sense the presence of everyone on the site, noting skill, hesitation, even doubt. Missteps were rare, and when they occurred, the structure seemed to correct itself almost instantly, as if responding to the vision that Nathan had poured into its plans. By December, the walls had reached the first story. Brick by brick, timber by timber, they climbed with unerring precision. The foreman, James Hollis, began to notice a pattern too precise to be entirely human. Lines that should have required plumb bobs and measuring tools aligned perfectly without them. Windows fitted exactly as drawn. The front portico, the exact width and height Nathan had insisted upon, seemed almost too right, almost unnatural in its balance. A rumor began among the laborers. Some whispered that Nathan's eyes held more than skill. Some said he could see the house already standing, not as boards and mortar, but as a complete presence. Some claimed that the mansion itself watched him, and perhaps the workmen too. Talbot, who sometimes lingered at the edge of the site, found himself speaking less. He had delivered Nathan to Marcus, yet he felt the presence of something older, something patient and quiet, observing the work. Winter arrived. The Georgia air turned crisp, and mist hung low over the lot each morning. Frost formed patterns on the foundation stones and glinted in the windows of the temporary site office. Workers noticed shadows that did not belong to them, shapes that seemed to move along the walls when no one was present. They said the mansion had a voice, a faint murmur like wind through leaves, though the air was still. Nathan stayed focused. He drew by candlelight when the sun set. He calculated column ratios again and again. He imagined each room, each hallway, each ceiling as if it were alive. Sometimes he thought he could hear the walls whispering faint instructions, guiding his hands, shaping his mind. Yet he felt no fear. He only felt responsibility. The house was his vision, his burden. And Marcus's restrictions, though strange, gave him clarity. He would never enter it, yet he would see it in the way it came to life. Marcus continued to make visits. He walked the perimeter, measured shadows, inspected bricks, but never suspected the subtle intelligence of the walls. Nathan felt a mix of triumph and unease. The mansion was perfect, yes, but perfection carried a weight. The house seemed alive in its silence. At night, Nathan dreamed of corridors extending infinitely, of rooms filled with light that could not reach him, of stairs leading to spaces that were impossibly higher, impossibly narrow. He woke with a strange sense that the house had remembered the dreams and intended to make them real. By January, the second story began to rise. The mansion had become a looming presence on the 3-acre lot. From the street, passers-by commented on its symmetry, its grandeur, its elegance. None knew of Nathan Grenville, the man who had imagined every detail and ensured its execution. Even Catherine Grenville, watching from the windows of the rented townhouse, sensed something strange. How could a man labor so intensely on a building he would never enter? How could walls rise with such silent command? She did not ask, for such questions were improper, but she wondered nonetheless. One evening, as Nathan was checking the alignment of the second-story beams, he noticed something unusual. The shadows cast by the columns were not consistent with the setting sun. They shifted slightly, as if the house itself were adjusting its angles. He blinked, checked his instruments, recalculated. The shadows were correct according to measurements. Yet they moved, just enough to feel alive. Nathan said nothing to Hollis. He understood something the foreman did not. The mansion was more than structure. It was intention made visible. Every brick, every timber, every line drawn and every detail carved had been placed with thought. And thought, he realized, could carry weight. He began to treat the mansion as a collaborator rather than a building. A living blueprint, responding to precision, responding to him. The workers whispered increasingly. A young mason swore he heard faint tapping at night, as if someone were walking along the unfinished floors. A carpenter claimed he saw the outline of a figure moving behind the columns, disappearing when approached. They began to avoid the house after dark. Nathan alone stayed late, measuring, sketching, aligning, listening. By February, the third story began to take shape. The mansion dominated the landscape, the light reflecting off windows and freshly cut stone. Marcus visited less frequently, content with progress and unaware of the building's quiet power. Nathan noticed patterns in the construction that he had not intentionally designed. Certain angles repeated themselves unexpectedly. Certain lines aligned with distant trees or the curve of the drive. The mansion seemed to refine itself, as though understanding the land and the sky and the human eyes that would one day observe it. Nathan understood then that the mansion was more than a structure. It was a presence. It absorbed the labor of the men, the vision of Marcus, the creativity of Nathan himself. And it remembered. At night, he dreamed of doors that would never open, of rooms he could never enter. He dreamed of voices from walls he had only touched briefly, and of light that followed him like a living thing. When he awoke, the mansion's presence felt stronger. Not threatening, not hostile, simply aware. If you want part 5 where the interior begins to take shape and the mansion's strange influence becomes more noticeable among the workers, subscribe now. Like and share this story. And tell me in the comments if you believe buildings can inherit the intentions and memories of the people who create them. If you want, I can immediately continue part 5 next with the interior and the first subtle horror signs among the workers. Do you want me to do that? Part 5 The interior awakens. Some houses are more than brick and wood. Some houses remember. Some houses judge. Before we continue, pause for a second. If this story gives you chills, subscribe now. Like this video. Share it with someone who loves dark history and haunted architecture. And leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now let us return to Savannah in early 1853, where the walls of the Grenville mansion were finally enclosing secrets that were not meant to be seen. By March, the exterior was nearly complete. The mansion rose 3 stories tall, gleaming in the southern sun, its Greek Revival proportions perfect. Columns stood like sentinels. Windows aligned in exact symmetry. The portico was wider than any neighbor had seen. Yet Nathan Grenville, the man who had imagined it all, never stepped inside. Not even a foot over the threshold. Construction moved inside. Hollis and Sons began framing the rooms. Floors were laid, walls went up, and ceilings soared. Nathan supervised with meticulous attention, walking from room to room with measuring tools, plumb lines, and levels. Every doorway was checked, every joist measured, every detail scrutinized. From the start, there was a quiet unease among the workers. They whispered about the interior spaces as though the house itself had grown a presence that was not entirely human. One carpenter swore he saw shadows move along a wall when no one was near. A mason claimed he heard footsteps on stairs that had not yet been built. Others said they felt eyes watching them, even when they were alone in a room with sunlight streaming through freshly installed windows. Nathan noticed it too, but he understood differently. The house responded to intention, to precision, to care. It remembered each measurement, each sketch, each decision. It carried the purpose Nathan had given it. Every beam and board seemed to hum with a silent intelligence. Marcus visited regularly. He inspected the progress from doorways and windows, marveling at the scale and elegance. He admired the sweeping staircases, the ballroom framed by tall Corinthian columns, the library designed to hold hundreds of books. He never suspected the subtle life within the walls, the quiet influence it exerted on everyone who worked there. Nathan directed the interior as he had the exterior. Rooms were arranged for function and effect. Drawing rooms overlooked gardens. Bedrooms captured morning light. Servants' quarters were efficient and orderly. Custom furniture was placed in exact locations, designed to enhance the flow and symmetry of each space. Strange things began happening more frequently. Tools would appear in exact positions when they had been left elsewhere. Drawings left on tables overnight were sometimes refined in ways Nathan had not done. The house seemed to anticipate errors and correct them before they could happen. Workers whispered about small objects moving on their own. A pencil would roll across a table, aligning perfectly with a beam. A hammer would be placed where it belonged, not where it had fallen. Talbot, watching from a distance, said nothing but shook his head in wonder. Nathan worked alone, absorbing every movement, every subtle anomaly, aware that the mansion was quietly alive. He began to notice patterns in the walls, the floors, the ceilings. Certain angles repeated unexpectedly, certain lines aligned with distant trees or sunlight. The house was not only built for function. It was built for observation, for memory. It carried everything Nathan had placed into it, and more. One night Nathan stayed late. The workers had gone home. The moonlight filtered through unfinished windows, casting long shadows. Nathan measured a ceiling joist, then paused. He thought he heard whispering, soft and deliberate, coming from the walls themselves. A murmur of breath, of movement, as if the house were speaking to him. He shook his head and focused. Perhaps it was imagination. Perhaps it was the weight of months of work. He returned to his drawings, carefully checking the alignment of moldings and cornices. But the feeling remained. The house knew he was there. It knew him by intention. By April, the mansion's interior began to take on an almost oppressive perfection. The ballroom was vast, yet balanced. The library walls curved subtly to enhance acoustics. Bedrooms felt larger than their dimensions. Windows framed views with uncanny precision. The house was more than a structure. It was a vessel of order, of symmetry, of unyielding calculation. The workers' unease grew. Some refused to enter certain rooms after dark. One laborer swore he felt the floorboards tilt slightly underfoot. Another claimed he saw a doorway stretch taller when he looked away. Nathan observed quietly, never dismissing their fears. The house was exacting. It demanded attention. It remembered every touch, every glance. Nathan himself began to feel the strain. The mansion required more than skill. It required vigilance. He could not allow a single miscalculation. Every night he checked drawings against progress. Every day he walked the halls, measuring, aligning, confirming. Sleep became a secondary concern. Food was taken only when someone reminded him. Marcus remained unaware of the subtle life of the building. To him, it was a triumph of design and money. He praised the scale, the symmetry, the elegance, but he never entered the interior more than a glance at a doorway. Nathan realized that Marcus's obsession with ownership was superficial. The mansion was not his. It never could be. It belonged to intention, to craft, to memory. Then came the first clear warning. A workman, installing a staircase, heard a faint knocking from behind the wall. He paused, listened. The sound repeated, deliberate and rhythmic. Hollis dismissed it at first. Wood settles, he said. Yet Nathan observed. He could feel a vibration, a subtle energy emanating from the walls. Something aware of the work being done. Something that remembered every pencil line, every measurement, every decision. Talbot visited and remarked quietly, "You feel it too, don't you, Nathan?" Nathan nodded, though he said nothing. The house demanded focus, not discussion. The mansion's presence was growing stronger. The interior rooms, though unfinished, seemed to vibrate with awareness. Every worker, every tool, every board was absorbed into the design, into the pattern Nathan had imagined. And at night, Nathan could feel the weight of it, pressing in through the floors, through the ceilings, through the very air of the workshop where he slept. By May, moldings were installed, door frames hung, windows fitted with glass. The mansion's interior was beginning to reflect the vision Nathan had worked for months to perfect. And yet he never entered a room beyond the doors. Every measurement was taken from outside, from thresholds, from angles and sightlines he controlled with instruments and calculation. Nathan began to understand fully. This mansion was alive in its own way. It responded to his mind, his intention, his focus. It remembered everything, and it would never forgive errors. If you want part 6 where the mansion's strange influence begins to unsettle Marcus and the workers in ways no one expected, subscribe now. Like and share this story. And leave a comment telling me if you believe buildings can carry memory and intention from those who create them. I can continue part 6 next, where the mansion's influence turns from subtle unease into unmistakable horror for the workers and even Marcus. Do you want me to write that now? Part 6: The mansion's watchful eyes. Some houses do more than shelter. Some houses remember every footstep. Some houses judge every intention. Before we continue, take a moment. If this story chills you, subscribe now. Like this video. Share it with someone who loves dark history and haunted architecture. And leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now let us return to Savannah in the summer of 1853, where the Grenville mansion was nearly complete and its presence had begun to weigh on everyone who worked there. The mansion had risen 3 stories, flawless in its Greek Revival proportions. Columns stood proud, windows lined up with precision. The portico stretched across the facade with imposing elegance. The exterior reflected perfection, and the interior, under Nathan Grenville's exacting supervision, was becoming more than just rooms and walls. It was a presence, almost alive. The workers had begun to feel it. At first it was subtle. A misplaced tool corrected itself. A beam set slightly askew seemed to right itself overnight. Whispers circulated about the building moving ever so slightly, responding to the humans inside. Shadows did not match angles of sunlight. Sounds echoed from walls that had no cavity. Hollis and Sons began to take notice. James Hollis was a man of experience, not easily unsettled. Yet he admitted privately that the mansion behaved in ways no ordinary building could. One afternoon, a mason, named Carter, was installing the fireplace in the drawing room. He worked carefully, checking the measurements against the drawings Nathan had prepared. When he stepped back to admire his work, he noticed the mantel slightly askew, though it had been perfectly aligned moments before. He adjusted it, measuring 3 times. When he returned the next morning, it was perfectly aligned again, with subtle adjustments he could not explain. A carpenter, Henry, swore he saw the shadow of a man moving along the far wall when he worked alone. No one else was there. The shadow disappeared when he turned his head. Even Nathan felt the weight of the mansion. He worked tirelessly, measuring, calculating, supervising. Yet at times he felt watched. The house seemed aware of his presence, aware of his intentions, aware of every line and every calculation he had made. Marcus Grenville remained unaware. He visited occasionally, pleased with progress, convinced he was seeing the fruits of his investment. He did not sense the quiet life of the walls or the influence they exerted over every worker. He did not know that the mansion remembered Nathan, remembered Marcus, remembered every decision made and every error avoided. By midsummer, the interior rooms were nearing completion. The ballroom rose with elegance, columns soaring to meet the high ceiling. The library walls curved to create subtle acoustics. Bedrooms captured the morning light with uncanny precision. The mansion's interior had become a silent force. Workers began to avoid certain rooms after dark. They whispered of doors stretching slightly, of floors that shifted imperceptibly, of furniture that seemed to move when no one looked. Some swore they heard faint footsteps pacing the halls, though they were alone. Nathan understood the mansion differently. He recognized its power. The house was exacting, responding to his calculations and his intent. It was alive in its own way, aware of him and the people around him. He began to treat it as a collaborator rather than a building. Every measurement, every alignment, every calculation was a conversation with the walls. Then came the first true incident. A worker named Thomas, assigned to install the grand staircase, vanished for an hour. When found, he was standing in the middle of the empty ballroom, staring at the ceiling, pale and trembling. He could not explain what he had seen. He only said the house had spoken to him, had demanded something he did not understand. Hollis tried to dismiss it as fatigue. Nathan knew better. The mansion was teaching obedience. It required precision. It demanded focus. And it remembered all who worked within it. Marcus continued to make brief visits. One afternoon he leaned over the railing of the second story and inspected the woodwork. He commented on the elegance, the proportions, and the craftsmanship. Nathan measured shadows and angles silently, aware that Marcus would never see the subtle intelligence of the building. It responded only to intention, and Marcus's eyes could not recognize it. By late summer, the mansion was complete in structure. Floors, ceilings, walls, staircases, windows, doors, and porticos were all in place. Yet the interior was empty, awaiting furnishings, paintings, and decoration. The mansion's presence was strongest in these empty spaces. Every echo, every whisper of air, carried with it the memory of its creation. The workers began to feel dread and awe in equal measure. One night, Nathan stayed late to inspect the third story. The moonlight poured through the newly installed windows. He walked the halls slowly, measuring, aligning, ensuring every detail remained perfect. The mansion seemed to shift subtly under his gaze. Cornices extended slightly. Doorways seemed taller. The floors vibrated faintly underfoot. He paused, realizing the house was testing him. It was aware of his presence and his intentions, watching to see if he remained precise. The workers whispered more openly now. Some refused to enter the mansion alone. A young carpenter said he heard laughter echoing through the empty rooms. A mason swore he felt someone breathing behind him, though he was alone. Talbot observed quietly, saying little. He could feel it too. Something unseen had taken residence in the mansion, watching and waiting. Nathan, however, remained calm. He understood the rules. The mansion demanded precision. It rewarded care. It remembered every action. He continued to supervise, measure, and calculate, knowing that the house's power would only grow as long as he remained vigilant. By September, furniture was brought in. Custom pieces designed by Nathan were placed precisely where they belonged. The mansion now had form, substance, and presence. Yet Nathan never entered beyond the thresholds. He remained outside, the guardian of the mansion's intelligence, the executor of its memory. Marcus Grenville remained blissfully unaware. He saw the mansion as a triumph of money and vision. He did not know that the house had already judged its creators and its builders. He did not know that it had a memory and a will of its own, responding only to precision and intent. Nathan understood this fully. The mansion had begun to live. It moved in subtle ways, whispered in faint echoes, and influenced every person who entered. The workers understood it in instinctive, fearful ways. Marcus did not, and Nathan, for all his skill and understanding, knew that the mansion's presence was growing stronger every day. The Grenville mansion would not simply be a home. It would be an entity. It would remember everything, and those who built it would never truly leave it, for the house was alive in its own way, waiting for the day it would fully claim its presence. If you want part 7 where the mansion begins to influence Marcus and his family and the first unmistakable horror occurs, subscribe now. Like and share this story. And leave a comment telling me if you believe houses can remember the people who build them. I can continue part 7 next, where Marcus himself begins to feel the mansion's strange influence and eerie events intensify inside. Do you want me to write that now? Part 7 The mansion watches its master. Some houses are built to hold families. Some houses are built to hold secrets. Some houses are built to hold their owners in silent judgment. Before we continue, pause for a moment. If this story gives you chills, subscribe now. Like this video. Share it with someone who loves mysteries, dark history, or haunted houses. And leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now let us return to Savannah in the fall of 1853, where the Grenville mansion had grown beyond architecture and had begun to influence those who lived nearby. Marcus Grenville had never entered the house fully, as he had insisted. He observed from doorways, inspected columns, measured shadows, and occasionally peeked through windows. At first, he admired the precision, the elegance, the beauty of a building that had surpassed even his own high expectations. But over time, he began to feel a subtle unease. The mansion seemed to watch him. Not consciously, not in any human sense, but there was a presence in the walls, a weight that pressed on his chest whenever he approached. Doors aligned too perfectly. Windows framed his view of the garden with a precision that felt personal. The house seemed to anticipate his movements, responding almost to his thoughts. Nathan Grenville, still supervising construction from the thresholds. and workspaces, noticed Marcus's change. He did not speak of it. Nathan understood. The mansion was alive in its own way. It responded to intention and remembered all who entered its gaze. Marcus's mind was becoming part of its memory. The servants were uneasy as well. They whispered about shadows that did not belong, about faint tapping on floors at night, and the feeling of being observed. Catherine Grenville noticed her husband's increasing tension. He paced the garden at odd hours, muttering about angles, light, and alignment. He became obsessed with perfection beyond reason. One evening, Marcus attempted to inspect the second story from the rear portico. The sun was setting, painting the walls in golden shadow. As he moved closer, he noticed that the shadows of the columns seemed to shift unnaturally, stretching longer or contracting in ways that should have been impossible. He paused. Something in him whispered that the house was aware of him, that it knew his intentions and would judge them. Nathan watched silently from the garden. He had noticed similar movements in the past weeks, subtle adjustments in door frames, stairs, and floors that no human hand had made. He understood that the mansion was asserting itself. Its memory extended beyond construction. It responded to human presence, and it would not tolerate error. Workers reported strange occurrences with increasing frequency. A mason heard footsteps pacing on the unfinished third floor and found no one there. A carpenter swore a shadow moved past a doorway, then disappeared. Tools left on benches were realigned exactly where they belonged, sometimes hours after being set down. Whispers floated through empty rooms, just audible enough to make hearts race. Marcus did not believe in ghosts. He believed in order and achievement. Yet he could not deny the growing tension he felt within the walls. It pressed against him in subtle ways, leaving him anxious and restless. Nights were restless. Dreams became vivid. He imagined corridors stretching endlessly, staircases rising impossibly high, and shadows moving along walls that he had measured himself. Nathan continued to work with his usual precision. He understood the mansion as a living blueprint. Every adjustment, every correction, every calculation was observed by the house itself. It remembered each action, and it was beginning to integrate Marcus into its memory. The mansion had begun to influence the man who had demanded perfection, showing him that it was more than a building. By October, the mansion was complete in structure and largely furnished. Custom furniture, rugs, paintings, and decorative elements had been placed according to Nathan's meticulous plans. The house was now a fully realized presence, carrying every memory of its creation, every intention, every command that had been given during the long months of construction. Marcus began to feel trapped by the mansion. He had built a masterpiece, yet it seemed to assert a will beyond his control. He noticed small details that disturbed him. The library shelves seemed to stretch longer than the room allowed. The ballroom ceiling felt impossibly high, and the shadows of columns shifted slightly even as the sun moved predictably. Catherine watched her husband with concern. He began to walk the mansion's perimeter at night, muttering about alignment and light. He became withdrawn, less sociable with neighbors, more obsessed with the house's perfection. He refused to enter rooms he had not yet inspected, though Nathan had assured him every detail was accurate. Workers grew fearful. Some refused to work after dark. One laborer reported seeing a faint silhouette pacing the ballroom. Another said he felt invisible hands adjusting floorboards. Talbot, who had delivered Nathan to the Grenvilles years before, admitted quietly to Nathan that the mansion's influence was stronger than anything he had seen before. Nathan, however, felt calm. He understood the mansion. It was exacting, alive in a sense that required vigilance and intention. It would judge, yes, but it would also reward those who worked carefully and with respect. He measured, calculated, and supervised, knowing that the mansion's memory now included Marcus, the workers, and every small detail of its creation. Then one night, Marcus awoke to a faint sound. Footsteps on the polished floors of the ballroom. A soft whispering, almost musical, drifted through the open windows of his temporary quarters. He rose, heart pounding, and crept to a window overlooking the mansion. Moonlight glinted off the columns, and shadows stretched unnaturally across the garden. Marcus felt a shiver. The mansion was not passive. It was aware. It remembered his presence. It demanded something he could not define. He stepped back, trembling, and realized for the first time that his creation was beyond his control. Nathan, in the garden below, observed from a safe distance. He understood what Marcus did not. The mansion had integrated him. It was testing him, teaching him that obsession with perfection came at a cost. And it would remember everything. By November, Marcus's obsession had deepened. He walked the grounds at odd hours, measured shadows, inspected walls from a distance, and muttered to himself about angles and light. The mansion had become a silent master over him. Workers whispered that the house seemed to move when no one watched, that floors shifted subtly, that doors sometimes opened and closed without explanation. Shadows of figures that should not exist appeared briefly and vanished. Nathan remained the only calm presence. He understood the mansion, its memory, and its will. He measured, supervised, and observed, knowing that the house had grown beyond its walls and timbers. It had begun to influence Marcus, and it would not release him from its attention. If you want Part 8 where the mansion's influence escalates into undeniable horror for Marcus and the family, subscribe now. Like and share this story. And leave a comment telling me if you believe a house can judge and influence the people who enter it. I can immediately continue Part 8, where the mansion begins to fully assert its presence over Marcus and the Grenville family, creating unmistakable terror. Do you want me to do that next? Part 8. The mansion takes hold. Some houses wait patiently. Some houses watch silently. Some houses decide. Before we continue, take a moment. If this story sends chills down your spine, subscribe now. Like this video. Share it with someone who loves dark history and haunted mysteries. And leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now let us return to Savannah in the winter of 1853, where the Grenville mansion's presence was no longer subtle and the first signs of true horror began to manifest. By December, the mansion had been fully furnished and completed under Nathan Grenville's relentless supervision. Each detail had been executed exactly as designed. Every line, every ratio, every custom piece of furniture was in its place. The house was a living memory of Nathan's mind and calculations. It had absorbed every decision, every intention, every whisper of direction given during its construction. And now it began to act. Marcus Grenville, once proud and confident, had become increasingly erratic. He spent hours pacing the garden and standing outside doorways, measuring shadows, inspecting columns, and observing the sunlight. Sometimes he would stop suddenly, staring at the facade as if it were breathing. Occasionally he would mutter, "Angles are wrong. Light is off." Yet Nathan had verified every measurement. Everything was perfect. The mansion, however, responded to Marcus's obsession. Windows would seem to tilt slightly when he looked away. Floors creaked in patterns that matched his footsteps. Doors would subtly shift just out of reach, creating a sense of imbalance that gnawed at him. Shadows stretched unnaturally, following him where no light should have cast them. Servants began to whisper about strange occurrences. Catherine reported soft knocking from empty rooms. Talbot saw shadows move across the walls of the ballroom when no one was there. A lantern left unattended would swing even when the air was still. Workers refused to stay in the house after dusk, claiming they could hear distant footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. Nathan understood these events. The mansion was alive in its own way. It was a vessel of memory and will. It responded to intention, and Marcus's growing obsession had drawn its attention. The house did not act out of malice. It acted out of precision. It corrected, it tested, it judged. Then the incidents escalated. One evening, Marcus went to inspect the library. The moonlight poured through the windows, illuminating the curved walls and custom shelves Nathan had designed to optimize both space and acoustics. Marcus heard a faint whisper, indistinct but insistent. He froze. The whisper grew clearer, forming words he could not quite comprehend. He backed away, heart racing, and the whisper faded. That night, he dreamed of the house. Doors stretched impossibly high, shadows twisted into shapes that mirrored his movements. Columns reached into darkness. Whispering voices echoed his own obsessive thoughts back at him. He awoke sweating, convinced that the mansion had spoken directly to him. The next day, the household noticed Marcus's changed demeanor. He became quieter, withdrawn, and obsessed with inspecting every room from the outside. Catherine expressed concern, but Marcus would only mutter about misaligned floors and improper light angles. Nathan observed quietly, understanding that the mansion's influence was growing. He remained calm because he had always known that this was possible. The mansion was precise and alive in its own way. It did not act randomly. It responded to thought, intention, and care. Marcus's mind, increasingly consumed by obsession, was feeding its awareness. Workers reported more disturbing phenomena. A carpenter swore he saw figures moving through the hallways when no one was present. A mason claimed the floors beneath him had shifted slightly, changing angles subtly while he worked. Tools left on benches were perfectly aligned when returned, even when no one had touched them. Some workers refused to enter certain rooms entirely, especially after nightfall. By January 1854, Marcus began speaking of the mansion as if it were a living entity. He no longer viewed it as a building but as a judge and overseer. He refused to enter the house fully, afraid that its perfection would confront him in ways he could not control. The mansion, now fully aware of its occupants, began to influence their behavior subtly, guiding Marcus's thoughts, shaping his fears, and testing his resolve. Catherine and the children felt the change too. Virginia, now 15, noticed shadows moving strangely in the hallways. Margaret and Anne whispered of cold drafts that seemed to come from nowhere. Catherine described hearing faint laughter when the house was empty, soft and almost musical. Nathan continued his work meticulously, ensuring that everything remained perfect. He walked the halls from the thresholds, measuring and observing. He felt the mansion's memory pressing on him too, but, unlike Marcus, he remained calm. He understood the rules. Obedience and intention kept the house aligned. Mistakes or negligence invited its attention in ways that could be unsettling. One night, a lantern swung violently in the grand hallway, illuminating fleeting shapes that appeared and vanished. Marcus, standing outside the doorway, stepped back in terror. The mansion had revealed itself to him fully. The shadows moved with intent. The floors creaked in unnatural patterns. Whispering voices echoed words that Marcus could not understand, yet felt compelled to obey. From that night onward, Marcus's obsession deepened. He could not sleep. He could not eat properly. He spent hours pacing the grounds, measuring angles, inspecting shadows, and counting columns. The mansion had claimed him. It had made him aware of its will and his own inadequacy in comparison. Nathan, observing, realized that the mansion had grown beyond the physical. It had become a silent intelligence, an entity born of intention, precision, and obsession. It remembered every line he had drawn, every calculation, every correction. It remembered Marcus and his family, their presence and their thoughts, and it was responding. The Grenville mansion had crossed the line from structure into influence. Its presence was undeniable. It shaped behavior, fed obsession, and tested all who entered. Marcus was no longer the master. He was a participant in something far older and stranger than he could comprehend. If you want part 9 where the mansion's influence escalates into terror that no one can escape and the first true horrors are revealed, subscribe now. Like and share this story. And leave a comment telling me if you believe a building can hold intention and influence its occupants. I can continue part 9 next, where the mansion's influence escalates into undeniable terror, affecting Marcus, the family, and the workers in ways they cannot ignore. Do you want me to write that now? Part 9 The Mansion's Unseen Hand. Some houses shelter. Some houses observe. Some houses take. Before we continue, take a moment. If this story chills you, subscribe now. Like this video. Share it with someone who loves dark history, haunted architecture, and true mystery. And leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now let us return to Savannah in early 1854. Where the Grenville mansion had moved from being impressive to something far more sinister, and the true horror of its presence began to reveal itself. By now, the mansion had completed its exterior and interior with a perfection that amazed even the most skilled craftsmen in Savannah. Yet the perfection carried a weight, a presence that no one had anticipated. Marcus Grenville had become increasingly obsessed, pacing the grounds at all hours, measuring shadows, inspecting every surface. He spoke rarely and muttered endlessly about alignment and proportion, as if the house were listening and correcting him. Catherine watched him with growing dread. She noticed his eyes darting toward corners of rooms that should have been empty. She heard him whisper about floors tilting and doors shifting when no one approached. She saw him recoil as shadows moved where shadows should not be. The mansion had begun to dictate his behavior, and he could not resist it. The children, Virginia, Margaret, and Anne, began to complain of strange happenings. Footsteps echoed through hallways when no one was there. Cold drafts seemed to follow them. They heard faint voices calling their names, whispers that vanished when they turned. Catherine tried to reassure them, but she herself felt uneasy. Even Talbot admitted privately that the mansion's presence was unnerving. Nathan Grenville continued to supervise. From the thresholds and workspaces, calm and meticulous. He understood the mansion's intelligence. It remembered every line he had drawn, every calculation, every decision. It judged intention and corrected deviation. He walked carefully, speaking little, measuring everything. He felt the house's memory pressing upon him but knew how to navigate its will. Then the first undeniable horror occurred. One evening, Marcus entered the mansion's main hall to inspect the newly installed chandeliers. The room was empty. Candles flickered, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Marcus took a step forward, then froze. A figure appeared at the far end of the hall. It was human in shape but distorted. Its face was blurred, its limbs slightly longer than they should have been. Marcus gasped and stepped back. The figure did not move toward him. It simply stood there, watching, then dissolved into shadow. The whispering began, soft and urgent, echoing in the high ceilings. Marcus staggered, realizing the mansion had revealed itself fully to him. The house was alive and aware. Workers reported similar experiences. Henry, the carpenter, refused to enter the ballroom after dusk. He swore he saw the floors ripple beneath his feet as if the house were breathing. A mason named Carter claimed the walls shifted imperceptibly while he worked. Talbot spoke of doors that opened and closed on their own and windows that reflected shadows that did not exist. The mansion's influence extended beyond fear. It demanded perfection and obedience. Any deviation, any mistake, seemed to provoke a subtle, immediate response. Floors would creak under weight where none should exist. Shadows would stretch to correct angles. Tools left improperly were found precisely aligned hours later. The house was not random. It was deliberate. Marcus became a prisoner of his own obsession. He spent nights pacing the garden, inspecting angles and columns, muttering to himself about light, shadow, and proportion. Sleep eluded him. Meals were neglected. His mind was consumed by the mansion's presence, which seemed to reach into his thoughts, shaping them, whispering corrections. Catherine tried to intervene, pleading with him to rest, to step away. But Marcus could not. The mansion had claimed him. It had become his master, observing and judging every movement, every thought, every intention. The family's life became defined by its influence. The mansion began to act more aggressively. Candles extinguished without reason. Doors slammed in empty corridors. Shadows moved against the flow of light. Whispers echoed in rooms where no one entered. Even Nathan, the only calm presence, noticed the house asserting itself in ways that suggested a growing awareness beyond memory. One night, Marcus entered the library, determined to inspect the shelves. Moonlight streamed in through the windows. He heard footsteps behind him. He turned. No one was there. A faint whispering surrounded him, seeming to come from the walls themselves. Books fell from shelves without cause. The chandelier swayed violently, though no air moved. Marcus stumbled backward, heart pounding, and realized fully that the mansion was alive in a way he could neither control nor understand. Catherine and the children began to experience sleep disturbances. Nightmares became vivid and shared. Shadows stretched unnaturally. Whispers called their names from hallways. The mansion was no longer just an influence. It was asserting dominance over the Grenville family, teaching fear and obedience simultaneously. Nathan continued his supervision, walking the thresholds, measuring, calculating, and observing. He remained calm, knowing the mansion's rules. It demanded precision, rewarded attention, and punished deviation. But even he admitted to feeling its presence more strongly now, a force that could influence even the mind of Marcus Grenville, the man who had insisted on perfection. By spring of 1854, the mansion had fully claimed Marcus's mind. He rarely entered the rooms, observing only from thresholds and windows. Shadows moved around him, floors shifted subtly, doors opened and closed on their own, and the whispering voices had grown louder, insistent, inescapable. The mansion had become a silent authority over every thought, every action. The household was tense and fearful. Workers refused to stay after dark. Servants avoided certain rooms. Even Nathan admitted privately that the mansion's presence had grown beyond architecture, into something far older and stranger than wood and stone. It remembered, it observed, and it judged. And it had begun to shape the thoughts of those who had created it. If you want Part 10, the final chapter where the mansion's ultimate horror is revealed and the fate of Marcus, his family, and Nathan is finally shown, subscribe now. Like and share this story. And leave a comment telling me if you believe a building can take control of the people within it. I can now create Part 10, the thrilling and chilling conclusion where the mansion's full horror is revealed and all secrets come to light. Do you want me to write that next? Part 10, the mansion's final judgment. Some houses endure. Some houses remember. Some houses decide who may live and who may never leave. Before we begin the conclusion, pause for a moment. If this story gives you chills, subscribe now. Like this video. Share it with someone who loves dark history, mysteries, and haunted stories. And leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. Your support brings these stories to life. It was late spring of 1854. The Grenville mansion stood in all its perfection, gleaming white under the Savannah sun, columns rising like sentinels, windows reflecting light in precise angles, gardens aligned to exact proportions. From the outside, it was a masterpiece. From the inside, it was a prison of shadows and memory. Marcus Grenville had been reduced to obsession and fear. He never set foot fully inside. He walked the perimeter, studied windows and doorways, and paced the gardens, muttering about angles, shadows, and the whispering voices he could not ignore. Every movement he made was watched, measured, and remembered by the mansion. Every thought, every doubt, every fear became part of its memory. Catherine and the children had grown quiet, fearful of the house they called home. Nights were sleepless. Whispering voices echoed through the halls. Shadows stretched along the walls even when candles burned brightly. Cold drafts passed through rooms with no apparent source. Doors slammed on their own. Objects shifted subtly but unmistakably. The mansion was no longer just a house. It was a presence, alive and aware, shaping the lives of everyone within its walls. Nathan Grenville remained the calm observer. He moved through thresholds, measured every detail, and guided the construction crews with meticulous attention. Yet even he noticed that the mansion had begun to assert its will beyond architecture. Floors would subtly shift when left unattended. Shadows moved in patterns no light could explain. Whispering voices became clear enough to recognize as the echoes of intention, memory, and correction. The mansion had grown fully aware. The first undeniable terror arrived one humid night. Marcus, pacing the rear garden, noticed a shadow moving across the ballroom windows. It was his own shape, yet it moved independently. He called out, but no one answered. The shadow paused, stretched, and vanished into darkness. The whispering grew louder, now forming words he recognized, a voice that seemed to speak directly from the mansion itself. You cannot escape perfection. Marcus stumbled backward. His knees gave way. The mansion had claimed him entirely. He felt its will pressing on him. It demanded his attention, his obedience, his terror. For the first time, he understood that he was no longer the master. He had become part of the mansion's memory, part of its design, part of its judgment. Inside, Catherine heard the whispers clearly for the first time. They called her name, then the names of her children. Shadows twisted along the walls, forming shapes that mirrored her deepest fears. Virginia, Margaret, and Anne cried out, but the voices drowned them. The mansion was aware of every thought and every heartbeat in the house. Nathan Grenville moved with precision. He had foreseen this moment, though not its intensity. He navigated the hallways and staircases with care, observing the mansion's memory in action. He could feel it adjusting to Marcus's panic, reinforcing its dominance, shaping the family's fear. He understood that the house required obedience and precision, and he had given it both. He was aware of its judgment, yet he remained calm. The mansion's influence escalated. Floors seemed to shift beneath feet. Doors opened and closed without wind. Windows reflected movements that did not exist. Whispers formed sentences, calling out intentions, doubts, and fears, echoing through the rooms and corridors. The house had become fully sentient in a sense that defied explanation, aware of every person within it, every action they took, every step they miscalculated. Marcus attempted to enter the ballroom. The moonlight poured in, illuminating the grand room. He stepped forward and froze. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the polished floors. The chandelier swayed, though no air moved. Whispering voices called his name, repeating his obsessive thoughts back to him. He fell to his knees. The mansion had claimed him completely. Catherine tried to gather her children. The shadows twisted in the hallways, the whispers intensified, and doors slammed shut on their own. She realized the mansion would not allow them to leave. It had remembered every step, every sound, every breath. It judged, and its judgment was absolute. Nathan observed silently. He understood what was happening. The mansion's will was exacting and precise. It rewarded obedience and punished deviation. Marcus's obsession had drawn it fully into his mind. The mansion was no longer a building. It was a living memory of perfection, a judge of human intention. It had asserted its control over everyone within its walls. By dawn, the mansion was silent again. Marcus remained kneeling, exhausted and broken, eyes hollow from nights of whispered judgment. Catherine and the children huddled together, fearful but unharmed. Nathan stood at the threshold, calm, knowing the house had tested them and asserted its dominance. The mansion had claimed Marcus's mind, reshaping his thoughts and fears. It had reminded the family that perfection was not merely a goal but a law enforced by memory and will. Nathan had survived because he understood its rules. The house remembered everything and everyone. It judged all who entered. It would never forget. The Grenville mansion still stands on the edge of Savannah. Its walls, floors, and ceilings remember the events of those months. Visitors see only symmetry, columns, and gardens. Tour guides tell stories of architecture and wealth. They do not speak of the whispers, the shifting shadows, or the presence that watches and judges silently. If you know where to look, you can feel it. A shiver when you pass a doorway. A shadow that moves against the light. A sense of being observed. The mansion remembers everything. It remembers Marcus, Catherine, their children, and Nathan. And it will remember anyone who dares enter. This is the final part of the Grenville Mansion story. If you want more tales like this, subscribe now. Like and share this story. And leave a comment telling me if you would dare to enter a house that remembers and judges. The mansion endures. The mansion remembers. And the mansion waits.